So the program that runs your conscious mind is thought, and the program that runs your subconscious mind is emotion. And when we really get down to it, emotion is what drives thought. When we trace the thought down to where it actually came from, it is usually an emotion that is driving the experience of that thought as well, okay? So the way to reprogram our subconscious mind is to reprogram our emotions, which are stored in our body, which is the same thing as our subconscious mind. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a graph, a scale of consciousness that completely changed my life. This is the scale of consciousness, which you can see right over here. Each level represents a certain level of consciousness. And as we can raise our level, then we can raise our awareness, raise our vibration, and raise our frequency to the point where what we want and how we feel is in alignment, okay? What we think, what we do, what we feel, what we have, they are all in alignment, and life is just a beautiful experience as a result of it, okay? Now, keep in mind that every person fluctuates based on the scale. Different areas of your life will be vibrating at different frequencies on this scale. But just knowing about this scale and gives you a context to actually analyze the different situations in your life, to analyze what emotions you are associating with the different areas of your life as well. Okay, so this scale was developed by David R. Hawkins, Dr. David R. Hawkins. He is a researcher, and it really came down to the science of behavioral kinesiology. Okay, this is a clinical science of spirituality. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, back in, 16th, 15th century, there was a scientist by the name of Rene Descartes. Okay, you can probably remember the guy who said, "I think, therefore I am." And this was really the domino that went forward into creating a worldview of materialism. Okay, thinking that the universe operates like a machine. There's a mechanistic model that determines everything that plays out, and if you can't see it, then it doesn't exist, and everything is governed by laws, and humans themselves have very little impact on the way that things play out in this universe. Okay, Isaac Newton built upon these laws, and then this was really what set stage for this material world that we live in, where we think that if it doesn't exist, if our eyes can't see it, if our senses can't perceive it, then it doesn't exist. But of course, the latest science in quantum physics has shown that everything is energy. Like when we really get down to the core of the atom, like 99% of it is empty space. So this behavioral kinesiology has been the opening up of the clinical science of spirituality, whereby, Rene Descartes actually split it up between thought and materialism. Okay, he said that thought is something that's beyond the comprehension of science, and therefore it falls in the jurisdiction of the church, of religion. Okay, but of course, this behavioral kinesiology, which is basically plugging different intellectual stimuli into the mind of the subject and then testing their muscle strength as a result of it. Okay, so for example, if someone is smiling and they test their muscle strength, it's stronger than if someone has been plugged in with the stimulus of saying, "I hate you," or the stimulus of this negative emotion. Okay, so the scale that you can see over here, right below courage, courage is the critical inflection point. Okay, right below courage is everything that is driven by the core of fear. Right above courage is everything that is driven by the core of love. And when we really get to the root of it, David R. Hawkins talks about how everything above courage is true power. And true power is when every party engaged in the interaction is coming out on top, okay? Force, on the other hand, is driven by fear, whereby it's like, I'm going to push you down in order to get what I want, and it's a win-lose situation. So true power is what we really need in this world. People have a messed up conception of what power actually is. But when we really get to the root of the word, it comes from the Latin posse, which simply means ability. Okay, ability to make something happen. And as the science of behavioral kinesiology has shown, as this graph over here is showing, that true power really comes at the higher levels of peace, of love, of joy, of reason, and then at the highest ones is enlightenment. Okay, so in this video I'm going to run you through each level of this scale and share my personal experience with how I was able to diagnose the different areas of my life and which ones fell into which level of the scale. Okay, so I have my laptop right here and I'm going to run through each level of the scale, and then you can go and use that level to analyze which situation you might be lagging in your own life. And then you can look back at the emotion that this particular level represents, and then look back at where this emotion came from in your life. Maybe it was back from childhood when you felt, for example, a certain emotion. And the best way to deal with that is to look through it from a different context. Okay, this is something that a lot of psychoanalysts do called inner child work, where they observe the past from a different context and begin to have compassion for the inner child that may have experienced some trauma, but looking at it through the lens that you have right now, which is the world of experience that you've already gone through. Then you can change the context of the past and let go of the emotion that you might be carrying as a result of the situation that happened in the past. Okay, so you can see the scale over here. I'm gonna run through it on my laptop, so because I don't have it over here. So the lowest level of consciousness is characterized by shame. Okay, now the reason for this is because back in the tribal communities that we evolved from, shame basically meant banishment. Okay, if you brought shame to your tribe, to your family, you brought shame to your honor, then you would be banished. And if you're banished, like in the harsh environments that our ancestors evolved in, it pretty much meant death. Okay, so this is like the lowest of the low, and this really brings insight into I was reading a statistic that most people fear public speaking more than they do death, right? And Seinfeld actually had like a really funny joke about this. He was saying that more people would rather be in the casket than give the eulogy. All right, so that is the reality of the matter, because that's what most people say. And the reason for this is because they don't want to bring shame, because there is some evolutionary mechanism, there's some survival mechanism which tells us that if we bring shame, we will be banished, and if we get banished, we will be killed. Okay, now the level above shame is guilt. Now guilt is really at the vibration of not feeling worthy in your life. Okay, now this is something which I've been able to analyze in my own life. Where am I carrying guilt? And when I was able to shine the light of my awareness on this, I found that I was carrying a lot of guilt around the area, going through puberty over here, around the area of money. Okay, so I was brought up in a family where everything was given to me all the time. Like my parents were well off, and even though I got everything that I ever wanted, like later on in my life, like, in towards my later teens and 20s, I felt some guilt because I felt like I didn't deserve to have these things in my life. Okay, now I wasn't consciously aware of this, but when I look back at my behavior about how I was going about creating business online as well, it was like I didn't feel worthy of actually having money in my life, because I didn't feel worthy of everything that I got from my parents back when I was young. But now, as I have been able to shine the light of my awareness on this area of my life, I can have compassion for that little child within me that was carrying this emotion associated with it, and learn to let go of it, so that I can go on to reprogram that part of my subconscious mind and reprogram it with the emotion that actually serves me and allows me to experience the abundance that I seek to create in my life. And that is still a process that is going on right now, and it is a process which will continue to go on, and it's just something that I have gotten awareness on, and that's like step one. And then step two is like getting deeper into it and understanding how I can go on to reprogram it into higher levels on the scale of consciousness. Okay, so above guilt is apathy. All right, and apathy is really characterized by a state of I can't. Okay, so it's like you are depressed because you are hopeless. You don't think that the future will be better than right now, and then you get trapped in this apathy, and that is when you begin to play the blame game. Okay, now this is above guilt, because when you blame factors outside of your control for why you are where you are, that is like you give up your own power and you let go of the guilt, because you're like, oh, I don't have any guilt right now because it's not my own fault. it's something else's fault, it's because I was born in this country, it's because I was born with these parents, or whatever excuse you come up with. But apathy is really characterized because you don't believe that the future can be better than the present, and this is when you're depressed. But the fact is that as we begin to raise from this level, then we get to the level of grief. And grief is really the level of sadness, of loss, of despondency. And most of us have experienced this, whether we go through something rough in our lives. But the people that stay trapped over here, then really it comes down to attachment. Okay, you have become overly attached to this thing that you're grieving, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whether it's an identity. And this is something that everyone goes through when they go through the process of personal transformation, at least in my personal experience. Like when I began to experience myself as an evolving being, as evolving into consciousness, on elevating my being, there is a moment of grief towards the old self, that who you were in the past, right? So letting go of identity, letting go of relationships, like all of these things that we get overly attached to, and then they leave our lives, then that creates a space for grief to seep in to our lives, all right? And the question that is great to ask yourself in this situation, if you're grieving, it's like, which area in my life was I looking to get rather than to give? Okay, because if you are attached to something so much, it's because you are seeking to get something from it. Okay, but if we can shift from that into giving, then we can let go of grief, knowing that we are complete on our own and we don't need anything outside of us to fill the void. Okay, so with each of these levels, just see and analyze which areas of your life you would be associating these emotions. And more often than not, it's something that's tied back to childhood. And when you can look at that situation through a different context, through a different lens, and begin to have compassion for your inner child, that is when you can begin to reprogram your subconscious mind, reprogram your emotions, and get to the root of why you do what you do in the first place, and begin to elevate above in these levels of consciousness. Okay, so above grief we have fear. Okay, now fear is what kept our ancestors alive, because when we were evolving in these dangerous environments of predators, of lack of food and like other tribes and stuff like that, fear is what kept us alive. And at the level of fear, at the level of fight or flight, which so many people are trapped in these days, it's like you have some energy available, all right? You're like, yo, I'm fucking fight or flight, right? Like I can fucking run right now, I can fucking fight right now. But of course, this is a lot of stress going on in your body. There's a lot of cortisol. And although fight or flight is great for in the moment when you need it, when you need to escape from like a tiger, from like a fucking predator, but if you are constantly keeping your fight or flight mode on, if you're constantly trapped in the level of fear, then that stress can accumulate and then cause so many psychological damages, and then those psychological damages can end up causing damages to your physiology as well, because they say that stress, like 70% of all doctors' visits are actually related to stress. So definitely keep an eye out for this one. And yeah, man, fear is like, it's a rough one, because anytime that we are looking out for danger and threats in our environment, then we are more likely to find them as well. Okay, if you are trapped in the level of fear, you don't think that the world is a safe place, you think that people are all crooks and criminals and everyone's out there to get you. And when you are carrying this thought process in your head, this emotion of fear in your body, then you are more likely to find evidence for it as well. Okay, this is known as the confirmation bias in cognitive psychology. And it basically means that whatever we believe, that is what our brain has been programmed to find evidence for. Okay, your reticular activation system in your brain has become programmed to look for threats in your environment every single time. And if it's out on looking for threats, then that is exactly what you will find as well. Okay, so what this is about, like what raising your consciousness and reprogram your subconscious mind is all about, is looking into the programs that were not installed by you. Okay, they were installed by society, they were installed by parents, they were installed by teachers, they were installed by peer influence. But when, like I said, you can look at those installation periods, like there's usually a situation that took place when you were a kid, when you can look back at that through a different lens, through a different context, then we can choose the programs that we would rather have rather than the ones that were installed within us without our conscious intention. Okay, so that's really what it's about, to reprogram your subconscious mind, to get aware on which emotions are associated with which areas of our life, which ones are serving us, which ones are not serving us, and letting go of the ones that don't serve us by reprogramming the emotion associated with that area of our life. Okay, now keep in mind that we do fluctuate on this scale, and we do fluctuate based on different areas of our life as well. So after fear comes desire. Now this is something that is very common in our society today, you know, consumer culture, to just get more and more and more. But of course, as is very evident, there is never enough. Okay, when more is never enough, because the more you try to fill, the deeper you dig yourself into that hole, and the more you want as a result of it. Okay, it's an insatiable appetite for more. And I mean, at the end of the day, we become slaves to that which we want because we think that we need it, not realizing that we are enough on the inside. So we want something on the outside to fill the void. And this is entirely what consumer culture is based on, marketing to us products that think will make us more by having these products in our life. But the reality is that, you know, one craving is only replaced by the next and the next and the next. Okay, it doesn't get to that point where you'll ever feel like enough by consuming things from the outside, because that is a rabbit hole which keeps on going down like a spiral. Okay, so keep in mind where you are associating these emotions of desire with things, because when you desire something, then you are also associating not having that thing. Okay, for example, if I really desire money, or if I really desire a girl that I want to be with, if I really desire good health, then the frequency that I'm vibrating at is that I don't have it. Okay, because if I want to desire something a lot, it means that the frequency that I'm at is like I don't have it, and maybe I don't believe it. The extent to which you desire something is the extent to which you believe that you are not worthy of having it. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind as well, because the things that come into our lives can come into them because we desire them. They come into our lives because we are vibrating at that frequency. Okay, so keep in mind that this could be a slippery slope as well. I mean, there's different areas of our life where this can apply, but just keep in mind about that. Okay, so right above desire is anger. Okay, now anger is a place where there is a lot of energy available as well, but it is based on desire as well, because the only time that we feel angry is when the reality is not meeting up with our expectations. Okay, so there's like frustration, and it really comes from the exaggeration of our desire. When we really want something to be a certain way, when we really want someone to be a certain way, but they are not living up to our expectations, and we lose control. And that is when anger comes up as a coping mechanism, so that we think that it might maybe help us regain control. But again, when you are angry, you're releasing these stress hormones, you're really destroying your body from the inside. And it's something that is usually a trigger for something else, which is why you wouldn't feel worthy about the thing in the first place. Okay, like I said, it's frustrated desire. And when you really, really want something and you're above here, you have more energy to get it, but this energy is actually dark, and it can end up destroying your body, even though it gives you energy in the moment. Okay, so anger is really something that has to be addressed, and like it really comes from expectation, because when we expect someone or something to be a certain way and we don't, that is what creates a space for anger to come in, because it's a coping mechanism that makes us think that we can get the thing that we want, but really it's doing more harm than good. All right, so it's like someone had a quote, I'm not sure who it was, but it's like, feeling anger is like drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die. All right, so it doesn't do anyone any good. So we have to get to the next level, which is pride. Now pride is right above anger, but the thing is that it's still dependent on external circumstances, right? And anything that is determined on external circumstances is not on a solid foundation, because you are not in control of how it shows up in your life, okay? And pride really holds us back from further development in our lives, because if we are prideful about what we know, who we are, what we think we have done in our lives, then we get attached to this, and it puts a cap on our growth in our lives, because we're so prideful. We're trying to sustain an image of who we think we are, or what we think we've done, but there is always further to go. But when we become prideful around these things, that is what limits our growth, okay? As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus says, you cannot learn that which you think you already know. And when we get prideful around our opinions, around our identity, around what we think we know, or around who we are, that is what limits our growth in that area of our life. And the only way to keep happy and fulfilled and feeling good in your life is to continue moving forward. And when we get attached to this one image, then it is like our behavior becomes an attempt to preserve it. Like everything just becomes an attempt to preserve it, and we need that external validation to actually feel like we are enough, okay? So yeah, pride is definitely a dangerous one as well. But of course, it's they all have their uses, right? Like we don't want to get overly attached to a certain area of our life, but we also want to have the awareness of where we are associating excess amount of pride, right? Like if you have pride around what you've done, like you feel good about yourself, that's called self-esteem. But of course, arrogance is when you tip it too much in that area, and that is when you have an overly attached association with some aspect of yourself, and that is really rooted in from insecurity, okay? So that is when we actually get to the root of there's lower emotions associated with this, okay? So right above pride is when true power first begins to arise, okay? This is what Dr. David R. Hawkins refers to as the critical inflection point, and this is the level of courage. Now, courage is the zone of exploration, of expansion, of realizing that life is exciting, it's a challenge, it's stimulating for us, we can continue moving forward. And at this level is when you are giving back to life as much as you are consuming from life, okay? Realize that you are alive right now because of the resources that Mother Nature has provided you with. The food, the sunlight, the water, all of these things are something that you consume to feel good about yourself, but of course, not feel good about yourself, but to actually sustain your life. And we are trapped in consumer culture. So many of us are trapped in consumer culture whereby we're consuming more than we give back. But at this level, when we begin to develop courage is when we begin to give back to life as much as we are consuming, okay? And right above this is the level of neutrality. And right below neutrality, Dr. David R. Hawkins talks about how below this level, we are trapped in duality, okay? We think in terms of right and wrong. We think in terms of black and white. We think in terms of, religions, in terms of nations, in terms of, me and you. But at the level of neutrality is when we begin to see everything as objective, okay? We begin to embody that observer's mindset, to echo the words of Shakespeare, who said that nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So at the level of neutrality, we understand that there are all shades of gray. Nothing is what it seems. Everyone is doing the best with what they think they need to do for themselves. And the judgment is basically letting go of, right? Everything is looked at through an objective frame. And we are more flexible towards the way that things are turning out in our lives, okay? And then right above neutrality is the level of willingness. And this is really when we have overcome that inner resistance in our life, all right? There's this inner resistance that is holding us back from being an active participant in our life. But when we rise to the level of willingness, we have overcome that, and we are able to go ahead and do the things that we know we need to do, okay? And then above willingness, we have the level of acceptance, okay? Now this is where there's a major transformation that takes place, because you realize that the life experience that you are having right now, you are the cause of it and you are the source of it, okay? In a previous video on inner engineering by Sadhguru, I talked about how it's the realization that everything that you experience in your life is taking place in the black box of your head. Okay, the brain itself doesn't see anything. It's like in total darkness. There's these sensory inputs that are making everything come in, and realizing that you are the source of the creation of your life. Therefore, you are responsible for choosing the experience, the nature of your experience in this very moment right now. And that is when you can begin to accept things in your life the way that they are, and realizing that everything is unfolding exactly how it is supposed to. And then at the level above acceptance is reason, and this is when we are able to understand the intricacies of relationships. We are able to gather a large amount of data and use that data to optimize our decisions moving forward as well, and able to make distinctions between the things that serve us and do not serve us in our lives. Okay, so I've seen this video coming up in like 25 minutes, but I'll just run through the last few levels as well. So the level above reason is love. And in society, we have this common conception of love as something like an emotional addiction, like the eroticism, like the, lusty version of love, like associated with sexual intimacy and stuff like that. But this level of love really represents is unconditional love. Okay, it's like loving everything that is, everything that you are, loving your fate. All right, the Stoics used to say amore fati, right? Love of fate, loving everything that is, knowing that love is a state of being rather something that you do to someone else. Okay, unconditional love is not based on anything. It's just an expression of who you really are at your core, which is pure love, unconditional love that doesn't change. It's permanent, it's stable. All right, everything else is fleeting, everything else is changing. But true unconditional love is something that is permanent. And then above love, we have joy, whereby Dr. David R. Hawkins talks about how love becomes even more unconditional as you begin to experience that inner joy. And at this level is when you can actually, in your interactions, you have a major effect on the people that you interact with as well. And just the world seems beautiful, and it's illuminated by just perfection of like creation, and every moment you can see the synchronicity, the divinity that is taking place. Okay, and then above the level of joy is peace, and then this is basically an experience of transcendence, whereby there is the distinction between object and subject, between subject and object, is getting thinner and thinner, and you see the unity that is taking place between all of life right now. And this is when there is no more rationality. There is no more trying to use your five senses, your reason, your logic to understand the truth, because the truth is something that you experience by the non-duality, by the unity that is in your perception right now. Okay, and then at the highest level is enlightenment. This is like self-realization. There's just a transcendence of all time, of all space, of all individuality, and the body is looked at as a tool of consciousness that is intervened by the mind. Okay, there's total non-duality, and in the level below this, it was like signs of it. It was fading, and then enlightenment is total non-duality. All right. Now, of course, getting to this level is going to take a lifetime. Who knows how many people actually get there? But there are moments that we can experience that allow us to get this point of view in our lives. All right. So just wanted to run you through this quick level of consciousness scale. Definitely recommend that you check out the books Power versus Force, Letting Go. Great books by Dr. David R. Hawkins. But this scale is really the key to understanding every other area of your life. Whatever it is that you want in your life, the only reason you don't have it is because you are not vibrating at the frequency of that thing. All right. The more you want something, the more you're vibrating at the frequency that you don't have it. The more you chase something, the more that thing will run away from you. So if you can elevate your vibration, elevate the frequency of your vibration, then you will naturally attract the people, the places, the things, the situations, the circumstances in your life that are in resonance with that. Okay. So I hope that you have found this valuable, and if you watched it all the way to this end, I applaud you. It's about 29 minutes at this point. But with all that being said, this has been Mo, and I will see you in the next video.